He started betting around age 11 on video games like skins and I guess offshore sites, and we didn't really understand what was happening.
I started gambling when I was 13 years old, and I was actually in my first Gamblers Anonymous meeting by the time I was 16.
So I went back the next day. I gambled all that money, plus whatever else I could get out of my checking account. I just remember for the first time, really, the thoughts of self-harm were so strong. Like, they were so strong.
This video is brought to you by our generous sponsors, Right Choice Recovery and the Campaign for Fairer Gambling. Check the description of this video for more information about Right Choice's services and for the campaign's mission statement. We've been discussing why gambling addiction is on the rise in the United States. This has been affecting people of all ages and all backgrounds. It's time that we hear some stories of people that have fallen into a gambling addiction or have had loved ones go down that path, because we need to illustrate this. We need to put a face to the pain. And I want to start by sharing the story of adolescents and teens. Let's begin with AJ's story.
My name is AJ Anzaldi. I'm a college student right now. I go to Rampo College, and I'm a big advocate against gambling. This all started back in 2022. Me and my friends downloaded an app called Fliff that we found, and there was a promotion going on. Every day you logged in, you'd get $5 free, and they'd call it Fliff Cash. It gradually built up. The first big loss I had out of my bank account was $100. The next week it was like $150, then $200, and it follows. It turned into my whole paycheck being gone. I felt like I had to up the bet to a higher amount. So instead of, just taking that free $5 that Fliff was giving me, I'd be putting like 50 of my own in, betting like $15, $20.
And you're 21 at this time?
No, I'm not. My mom trusted me to make an account, and I explained to her that I don't have a problem and I'll be fine. I just want to use it for sports, which I completely lied to her. Now we're into the summer of 2024, and this is the worst of it. I'm driving down the shore. We go down to Wildwood, and the billboards at MGM. They have a deposit match for $1,500. This was a late night. I'm by myself in my bed. What else am I gonna do? And I'm playing a casino game now. And I had my balance up to $11,000 in one night. I told myself, this is the stopping point. Like, you got everything back, well, most of it, but I didn't stop. I don't know what kept driving me to keep playing. That's a very large amount of money that I just wasted away.
So the entirety of the situation for you played out before you turned 21?
All of it, yes. I'm not even 21 yet.
AJ was losing thousands of dollars all before he turned 21. This isn't even that uncommon to occur. Next, I talked to Tina. She's been working with adolescents and teens for years, helping them with their gambling addictions.
My name is Tina. I am the executive director of Right Choice Recovery. So there's a lot of kids that figured out how to do offshore accounts, and that's what we see a lot of, right? Because they're under 18. How can I gamble? How can I get this? Right? That's one way, is finding an offshore account. They're gambling through that. But what we realized a lot of is that parents, more so fathers, right, into sports, something I want to share with my son, and they open a FanDuel account for their son.
Have you seen even younger clients coming in and presenting with problems?
I think the youngest we've seen was 13. So what is that, a 7th, 8th
about
grader,
middle school.
right?
Yeah.
So we've seen that, we've heard it from teachers.
Whoa, she said 13? When I was 13, I was playing Pokemon with my friends. I can't even conceptualize getting addicted to gambling at 13, and yet that's the reality right now.
I say to parents often, right, like especially people that are having kids now, right? Think about all the times you go to the restaurant and you put down a tablet for your kid so you can have a quiet dinner and your kid's entertained. And then the kid looks over at you and says, oh, can I buy coins for this game? There's the first introduction. 5 years old, I'm buying things. Then my kid gets older. Now they're in middle school and they have a tablet. They want to buy this. They want to buy this for the game. I need more people. Whatever it is in video games is really the first introduction. The more I have, the more I get, the more I earn. And it's that concept of never having enough. And because the brain's only being stimulated on a tablet or a phone, what other coping skills did they learn except from that isolation of looking in a screen?
I also wanted to know what challenges gambling addiction poses to the younger demographics specifically.
Adolescents don't feel the consequences as much as adults because a lot of times the family will bail them out. It's a phase, right? So I'm going to fix that phase and we're going to keep it moving. So there's that bailout, right, that we talk about for adults, like nobody should bail you out. Like we need need to do a budget, we need to do that financial plan. Kids don't learn budgeting. They don't know what it is to be responsible with a dollar. They'll never grasp the concept of financial responsibility if they're being bailed out.
We know that younger people are highly impressionable. Their brains are still forming. But gambling addiction can impact anyone at any age, even when you're a fully developed adult. Let's look at how gambling addiction impacts grown men.
My name's Dave Yeager. I am a podcast host, I'm an author, and a speaker. This really was the catalyst weekend for me that made me know that I had to get help. It was a Friday night. I had just gotten paid. So of course I took a few $100s and I took it down to the casino, my favorite casino at the time. Got there Friday night, went in there, started betting, not long before I won, and I was up a couple $1,000s. I couldn't wait to run out of money so I could leave, but I wouldn't leave till I ran out of money. I was in that mode. But finally I ran out of money and I thought, okay, I've been here overnight. Let me go home, let me be depressed like I always am now. I get out to the car, I turn the car on, and I'm hearing this spiritual music. I'm like, why are they playing Sunday morning music on a Saturday? It was Sunday. I was in that casino 36 hours and didn't even know it. And at that point, sitting in that vehicle, I remember thinking to myself, I'm helpless.
Dave's story goes to illustrate the impacts that a gambling addiction can have on your mental health and the extremes that it can send you down. Next, I want to share Sam's story. He faced an ultimatum as he was about to become a father, but he was desperately hooked to gambling.
My name is Sam DeMello. I'm the founder and CEO of eVive. The deepest, darkest secret of my life is that I had a crippling gambling addiction. I started gambling when I was 12, when Chris Moneymaker won the World Series of Poker. I played poker from 12 to 22 in person, and there were big barriers between me and my ability to gamble, like the drive to the casino. And then when I was 23, I discovered online gambling and sports betting. And in the course of probably 2 months, I went from a $5 bet on the Golden State Warriors at a bar with my friends to a $200 bet on Ukrainian ping pong at 2 a.m. on my phone. I spent the next decade or so with my entire life managed around gambling. It was the first thing I did when I woke up. It was the last thing I did when I went to bed. And as I kept gambling, I lost more and more control. I never thought of myself as addicted to gambling because I was working. I had a high-paying job, but internally I felt totally ashamed and totally out of control. I walked into a therapist's office who didn't have experience working with gamblers, and I said, I have this big gambling problem. And they said, tell me about your traumatic childhood and everything you're trying to escape. And that just wasn't my story. I had a really supportive family. I grew up with a lot of people that had a lot less than me. I felt very privileged, and I felt like I walked into a hospital and I said, I'm bleeding out of my head. And they started by examining my feet. And after 6 months of that, I gave up and just decided I was destined to be an addict, and that was my fate. Everything fell apart, my relationships, my self-esteem, my career. And eventually I opened up to my wife, told her about my gambling problem, and through a lot of trial and error and a lot of mistakes, I eventually got myself into recovery.
Sam was truly able to turn his life around and become the person that he was always meant to be. I'm incredibly proud of him. Adam, the next man that I interviewed, was also in a situation where he knew he had to leave his gambling in the past. He now spends his time running a podcast dedicated to helping others who are going through the same situation that he is. Let's hear his story.
My name is Adam Lyons. I'm a compulsive gambler. I host the Modern Meeting podcast, and I've been away from a bet since February 8th, 2022. I can remember sitting at a Keno slot saying, okay, this might be it. This really might be it, but if this is it, we're going down swinging. And I was up thousands at one point, but it wasn't enough. I end up losing it all, and I end up in a random parking lot in Oklahoma at 5 a.m. I can't afford to buy a candy bar. What am I gonna do? How am I gonna pay these people back? I've had this thought so many times, but this time it was different. This feeling washes over me and I'm like, wait a minute, I think I'm good. I think I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
Adam continues to help people every single day. People like Rob, someone who spent years addicted to gambling, racking up an incredibly large debt while also battling other addictions. Here's a bit about Rob's story.
So I started gambling when I was 13 years old, and I was actually in my first Gamblers Anonymous meeting by the time I was 16. Monday goes into Tuesday, goes into Wednesday. There's nothing really to look forward to because you're stuck in that box. And in that box, you lie, you're stealing, you're manipulating. It's kind of a shallow life. So it starts out with, bookies and sports, and then it goes to casinos, then it goes to lotteries, then it goes to, borrowing and fantasy sports and on the golf course and anything you could do to get that rush, that high, that natural dopamine hit that we get from placing a bet, and you start to owe so much money, and you also lie in so much that you have to continually keep that cycle going, because in your brain that's the only way out. I did it all, Rob. I tried the lottery, I tried the keno, I tried the casinos, the blackjack. I've even had the exotic stuff with high-lie and dog tracks. And when you get to a point where you're in that much pain and you realize that you don't need gambling to live. You need your arms, your legs, you need to eat, you need a drink. It doesn't impact your day-to-day life.
And here's Matt, who struggled with a gambling addiction before he even turned 18. He's now become a leading reform advocate in the United Kingdom, helping others who are struggling with gambling to find recovery.
I'm Matt Cousin. I'm a co-founder of Gamban, and I've been campaigning for reform to gambling policy for the last 13 years. I got addicted to gambling when I was about 16, and I went into a betting shop and started interacting with fixed odds betting terminals, which were machines where you could bet up to £100 every 20 seconds on roulette. And I found roulette to be an extremely addictive game, and played at 3 spins a minute on machines that were very easily accessible. So my introduction to gambling came in around 2006.
Now I feel like people have come to expect that men struggle with gambling addiction, but they seem shocked when I tell them that women also struggle with gambling addiction. In fact, they have so many more issues that are unique to them that are just mind-blowing, but people don't seem to realize it. Here's some stories of women and the specific challenges that they face in recovery. Let's start with Christina's story.
So I'm Christina Cook, and I am the host of the Broke Girl Society podcast and founder of the Broke Girl Society support group.
And what is that support group seeking to accomplish?
So my work for the Broke Girl Society is based on my own experience with gambling. I wanted to create a safe space for women who've been impacted by gambling, whether it's the gambler themselves or their loved ones, to try and better understand how to help support the one that's struggling with gambling. I remember sitting in a machine and betting 25 cents and going through $5 and being like, oh, I can't believe I just did that. I can't believe I spent my money on something like that. And then it would just progressively, I still kind of remember putting a 20 in and betting 60 cents. So it was like entertainment money, like what I'd spend at the movies on a Friday night. I was still thinking about all the money I lost. So I went back the next day. I gambled all of that money plus whatever else I could get out of my checking account. I just remember for the first time, really, the thoughts of self-harm were so strong. They were so strong. And I was thinking how I could do it. And I was sitting in my car and I went to pick up my phone because I knew I'd have missed calls and all these. And a picture of my mom and my sisters came up on my phone from my sister's wedding. And I just remember thinking, I can't do that to them. They love me so much no matter what I've done to them through this addiction. That moment that something changed in me of I don't really want to die. I wanted to actually live.
And what's the secret to staying away from gambling for almost 4 years?
It's building a life you don't want to escape from.
Next, we need to hone in on some of the challenges that women specifically face in recovery. So I talked to Kitty Martz. She shared her perspective as someone in recovery herself.
I'm Kitty Martz. I'm the Executive Director of Voices of Problem Gambling Recovery, which is out of Oregon.
Would you be willing to speak a little bit from your experience as to what makes gambling harm unique for women?
We tend to be put in a position to be helpers and givers and do a lot of mental loading, and we've had a lot of unpaid labor, and we've had to have dual roles now in our current economy of both working outside the home and inside the home. I think there's been studies that women tend to do an additional 40 some hours of unpaid labor within families and stuff like that. And with the accessibility being there, that makes us particularly vulnerable.
So 24/7 accessibility strikes again. To further hammer this home, I want to share Elizabeth Thielen's story. She's a former semi-professional boxer whose career ended abruptly, leading to a gambling addiction.
I'm Liz Thielen, and I'm a certified gambling counselor out of Illinois. So gambling was in my life from a really young age. So I had a family that was just really into gambling, and it was just part of how we all got together. There was cards and dice for money. I used to go to the track with my parents and help them pick the horses. I grew up in a house that loved boxing, so you've got the whole like boxing Vegas connection. And when I was old enough, that's what we did. We would go to the casinos, we would go to see fights in Las Vegas, and it was just kind of all wrapped up together in family and sport and excitement. I actually had an offer to turn pro on the undercard of Sugar Ray Leonard and Hector Macho Camacho, so I was going places. We held off on that because women's boxing was not yet in the Olympics, and it was coming around, and so I was at that kind of Olympic qualifying level, so we were holding out for that, the Olympics or turning pro. My schedule was very kind of caught up, very intense, you know, competing. It's a very like adrenaline driven thing, so my schedule completely changed. I went from working out, you know, hours a day, 6 days a week, no downtime, to nothing. I went out on a loss, so I had my one and only career loss right before the end of my career, so I'm feeling very like lack of confidence. And I remember that when I would be at that poker table, I felt like this sense of importance and action, you know, like we've all heard about action, you know, I missed that, and I could get that at the poker table. For me, more important than realizing that I couldn't do anymore was that I didn't want to. That the way that I had gotten used to gambling and wanted to gamble was really, really sick. If I was honest with myself, what I really want to do, probably still want to do, is to gamble in a very, very sick and uncontrolled way, but not have the consequences. Having that like somehow insight was the thing that did it for me, like, okay, and I'm out. And I've just been out ever since.
It's a well-known fact that for every person that struggles with a gambling addiction directly, they impact directly further 7 to 10 more people. Spouses, parents, kids, friends, co-workers, the list goes on. Relationships can be strained as the problem gambler takes out frustrations and negatives on those around them. Take Sandra, for example. We just heard about her husband, Rob, and his gambling addiction, but how did it impact her?
My name is Sandra. I am married to an addict, a compulsive gambler. You cannot see it, you cannot smell it, you cannot test for it. You know, a gambler could pass a lie detector test, right? Isolation, you know, detaching from life, you know, electronics, watching sports constantly, maybe perhaps watching sports teams that you're not a fan of. Those types of behaviors are the red flags of potential gambling.
And when your husband was in the throes of gambling addiction, could you tell that he was going through it before he came out and told you?
At the time, no. I was not aware. We are Yankee and Jet fans. We would watch those games. I never noticed him, you know, watching basketball or hockey or any of the other things that he was betting on. I mean, he really did it very secretively.
How did your husband's gambling addiction impact you?
It comes from both an emotional and financial impact, right? You know, of course, financially it can be devastating on many levels. Houses, assets, college funds, right? So there's that piece of it. But emotionally, that's the worst, because when the gambler's in active addiction, they are lying, they're cheating, they're stealing. It's bottomless.
Or let's take the story of Kim, whose son struggled with a gambling addiction.
My name's Kim Freudenberg, and I'm a high school physics teacher in San Francisco. My 22-year-old son is a recovering gambling addict. He started betting around age 11 on video games like Skins and I guess offshore sites, and like we knew that he was doing video gaming and skins buying, and we'd see like Visa gift cards, and he'd randomly make like a PayPal account. We just thought it was some weird video gaming thing, and then it would kind of go away and come back. So we didn't really understand what was happening to him at that point. And then when he went to college, he went down really quickly with more traditional forms of gambling. And at that point, then we realized there was a problem.
And what was the day like where he told you what was going on?
So he had come home from college after his first year, just pretty much had collapsed. It was really terrible. Like when he was really in action, and he was just horrible and awful and mean and destructive to himself and to us and to the house, and just not my kid. Prior, you know, to this, like he was my baby, right? He's my kid. And if the parents aren't aware and don't know what to look for, then the kids are just gonna keep going until, you know, who knows what happens, you know, so I think that needs to change.
With so much pain, why does the gambling industry continue to grow in the United States? Where are we heading as a society? What will happen to gamblers in America if nothing changes? hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the answer in the next episode. In fact, an estimated 50% of people with a gambling disorder have committed a crime to fund their gambling.
And we lost. And we owed, I think with the VIG on that, we ended up owing like 17 grand. And all of a sudden I'm like, I need to rob a bank.